How can we teachers push against wokeism in primary and secondary schools and get kids to care again? Oop.
Well, the first thing I would say is talk it over with your family, right? Because if you're going to enter the fray, you better not do it accidentally, and you better do it with some preparation. And I would say, get your resume in order. Yeah. Lay out an alternative pathway forward. You know, there may be other places you can find work. But you have to have that in your back pocket, because you can't enter into a war without being prepared. And you can't do this stupidly and impulsively. And then you got to think about what it is you're fighting about and why. And you know, if you're a sensible teacher, you're fighting to be able to serve your students properly and to tell the truth, right? That's what you're fighting for if in your whole life, if you have any sense, but certainly on the teaching front. And I don't think there is a more dire sin than corrupting children. That's pretty much pinnacle sin right there. Maybe the only more egregious error is swearing to do nothing but violate your own conscience, you know, out of spite and bitterness. That might even be worse, but it's a tough battle for most hellish error. And, you know, so that's another thing to think about if you are a teacher or someone entrusted with the care of other people, is that you're going to have to take your blows to push back against enforced and mandatory idol worship, let's say. But that's a lot easier battle than losing control of your own soul. So, and I really mean that. So, you know, there are times where all you get to do is pick which hell you're going to wander into, because you're already there in some regard. And I think we're living in institutions now that are corrupt enough often so that if you happen to be tangled up inside of them, those are basically your choices. But, you know, you still try to put yourself together so you have potential alternatives at hand, so you can't be threatened too direly with the loss of your livelihood. And talk to your family, talk to your friends carefully, lay out a plan, use minimum emotion, minimum force, start talking to parents, because what you'll find as a teacher is that like 85% of parents agree with you, or 90% or 95%. Especially when it comes to the propriety of 144 quadruple D giant-breasted trans teachers teaching shop, for example. There are really very few people who think that that's a good idea. And so, although they seem to exist, perversely enough, and I mean that with the precise meaning of that term. And then, you know, strap yourself in, because you're in for quite an adventure if you decide to go up against, you know, Moloch, let's say, and you want to do that lightly. So you got to gather your family and your friends around you, make yourself a plan, lay out an alternative pathway to something approximating economic security, be prepared to move if you have to. You know, there's a walloping teacher shortage in the United States, and there's still places there that are vaguely sane. And so prepare yourself, you know. But like I said, you're gonna fight this battle one way or another. We're all in it. And you know, you might think, I'll just keep my mouth shut and wait. And it's like, the problem with that theory is that as you keep your mouth shut and wait, you get weaker and older. And as those who you aren't pushing back against advance, they get stronger. And so, you know, you might think, well, I'll handle it in 10 years. It's like, no, you won't. there'll be a lot less of you in 10 years than there is now if you keep retreating. And the thing that you're retreating from will just get larger as it devours whatever's in its path. So it's pretty much here and now, folks. And so you might as well just swallow that bitter pill and also understand that you probably don't have anything better to do anyways. Well, I really mean it. I mean it. Here's something that's useful to know. So in the story of Abraham, God is presented as the spirit that calls those who are too comfortable and privileged to the adventure of their life. And you might say, well, that's pretty rude of God. It's like if you're all comfortable and privileged, Abraham is the son of rich parents, and he doesn't need to do anything in order to keep body and soul together except lay on the cot and, eat peeled grapes. And God still makes himself manifest to Abraham in the form of that voice that exists inside of all of us saying, get the hell out of your comfort zone there, buddy, and take on the snakes. And you might say, well, I'd rather lay here and, eat Cheetos and watch pornography. And, actually, you wouldn't rather do that, because one of the propositions that's embedded in the narrative of Abraham, which happens to be right, is, we're built for romance and adventure, not for comfort. And so you're going to find the meaning of your life in adventure. And if you have an adversary voluntarily accepted, you've got yourself an adventure. And if it's a pretty big adversary, well, then maybe you'll grow the hell up and get tougher while you fight it. And so you've certainly got that battle right at your doorstep. Teachers, it's waiting right there for you. And so you could also imagine that you don't have anything better to do than what's right. And I don't just mean morally better in terms of your traditional duty. I mean literally better. There is nothing that you have to do that's better, all things considered, than to do what's right. That's why it's right. And you know that, and the reason you know that in part, because when you don't do what's right, your conscience tortures you. And that pesky little thing, and it won't go away. And that's pretty weird. Like, what's that about? Why can't you just give it a slap and, keep wandering on your merry way? And the answer is, well, that isn't how reality is constituted. So do what's right and see what happens. One of the things I did come to understand is that the adventure of your life is embedded in truthful speech. So if you dissemble or remain silent, then you're hiding your light under a bushel. You're not revealing into the world, unfolding into the world who you are. And so that means you're not living. And you're going to suffer and be weak and waste yourself if you're not living, by definition. And then you might say, well, how do you live? It's like, well, by being who you are. That's how you live. How could it be any other way? And you can't do that in falsehood, because, well, by definition, if it's false, by your own standards, it's not you. Then you live someone else's life. That seems like a bad idea. And it really raises a terrible question, is if you're not living your life because you're silent or you dissemble, you lie, so you lie by omission and commission. If you're not living your life, whose life are you living? And if you don't have control of your tongue because you're lying, who has control of your tongue? And the answer is, well, if you're lying, that the spirit of deceit has the control of your tongue. And I can tell you for certain that there is no worse master than the spirit of deceit. So that's what rules totalitarian states, right? And you might think, well, that sounds kind of metaphorical. It's like, no, it's not metaphorical at all, although it's also metaphorical, I suppose. It's not merely metaphorical. What's a totalitarian state? It's not innocent, free people being oppressed by like a single Hitler. It's every single person lying about absolutely everything to absolutely everyone all the time. And so the ruler of the totalitarian state is the prince of lies, obviously. And I would say, you probably don't want to invite him into your room, right? So that's all very much worth thinking about, you know, unless you want to slouch roughly towards hell. And we're definitely toying with that at the moment in the West, and maybe not so slowly. So, and that's on you, right? You know, every time you are silent, every time you're silent, when you have something to say, the tyrant takes a little more ground. And that's on you, man. So don't do it. Don't do it. You'll pay for it. So will everyone you love. So will everyone else. So, yeah. All right. On that happy note,
Jordan, did you make your bed this morning?
yeah, actually, I was in a hotel room, so I didn't have to. But
Did you?
yeah, I did. So there. Ha ha. Take that, critics.